We've had the first weekend of Ikoria spoilers, and today we're going to talk about the cards that we think are going to be impactful in Pioneer. Pioneer is Magic's newest Eternal format, and whenever a new set comes out, everybody likes to think what kind of new cards from the set can go into this new format. So we're going to talk about that today.
We've got some definite spicy toys to play around with in Pioneer. Let's talk about them. The video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below.
Hello and welcome to the day.
Thank you for spending your time with us.
I'm Jake.
I'm Joel. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. We've got the first weekend of Ikoria spoilers down. It's in the books. We've got some cards that we think are going to play in Pioneer, and we're going to discuss them. But first, if you wouldn't mind, if you like the video by the end of it, go down there and hit that like button, that subscribe button. It really helps us out.
It's the best way to support the channel as we continue to grow. So you're going to see at the bottom, you're going to see prices scrolling, but this video isn't so much about prices. As you're going to see, there's an uncommon in this, and these cards are just cards that we think are going to be very good and very impactful in Pioneer.
Fiend Artisan costs 2, one each of either hybrid, black, and green. It's a creature nightmare 1/1 that gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard, and it's got a little bit of a birthing pod style effect where you pay X and either hybrid, black, green, tap it, sack a creature, search your library for a CMC X or less creature card and put it right onto the battlefield. You can only do it at sorcery speed. This card is a house.
Yeah, this card is absolutely amazing. So Birthing Pod typically costs 3 and then a Phyrexian green in order to use. Birthing Pod was banned in Modern just because it was like a little bit too much. There's a little bit too much of a toolbox effect going on. But this card, you can do it for less. And this is going to allow you to run a toolbox set of cards in your deck. Like we were just talking about this card. You can run a 1 of Phyrexian Revoker. You can run a 1 of Ravenous Chupacabra. You could just put cards that are tuned for other decks, kind of like how people were playing the Bring to Light, the Niv Mizzet Bring to Light deck, or Niv to Light, I believe is what it was called. And it was running just 1 of cards that are very situational. And this card is going to allow you to do a very similar thing. And it's going to cost less than a Birthing Pod. I just think it's really good. Now, Birthing Pod is different because Birthing Pod is going to search for a creature with 1 plus the converted mana cost of what you're sacrificing. This card is very specific. You're searching for X or less. So the card obviously gets better late game, but there's a lot of really pesky stuff that you can search up early on that's going to give you an advantage, and this card is just fantastic.
I really like the idea of searching for a card like Chupacabra or searching for a card like Phyrexian Revoker. It lets you run 1 of in those decks, like Jake said, and gives you that toolbox aspect to go and get, whatever you need at the time, whether it's a Rec Sage, whether it's a Phyrexian Revoker, or something like that.
And you were talking about Grizzly Salvage as well. Right. You could play this card in such a situation where you've already filled up creatures in your yard. So when you play this, it's not just going to have a squishy 1/1 toughness. This card is going to end up being playable in such a way where, you could play it out of range of all of your opponent's burn spells if you know what they're playing. Like, they're not going to be able to answer this in certain decks if you play it at the right time. That's what just makes this card just so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We put it first, and the next card, we put that next card second, because we feel like there are already decks in existence in Pioneer that this can slot right into. The Soulflayer deck kind of bounced around. It's been absolutely pushed down the tier list a little bit as far as strength, but this is the kind of card that can come in, give the Eiko Agari style deck exactly what it needs to be hyper competitive at a higher level and start, dealing with some of the mono white decks, some of your inverter decks, some of your Niv to Light, and the tap combo decks that are running around. Our next one that we've got here.
And really quick before we move on, the cards that you can grab with Fiend Artisan, they don't have to be in those colors. So you could run a 1 of like a Manic Vandal type event,
right,
or a Manic Vandal type card that's going to allow you to come in, destroy an artifact. Like, it's really, really good what you can do with it.
Absolutely. Sprite Dragon is next up. We've got Is It Phoenix decks already running around. We've got Is It In Soul decks already running around. We feel like this already maybe has a home in Pioneer. Like Jake said, this is an uncommon. This video wasn't so much about prices that we thought were going to be very expensive cards or cards that were going to be sleepers. Those videos are still forthcoming. These were just cards that we definitely thought had a home in the Pioneer competitive environment. The thing that puts this one over the top for me, and the only reason I even want to include this on the list, is it's got haste.
Oh, dude. Yes.
If it doesn't
100%.
have haste, this card is kind of a fine card. It's not anything special, but that haste really gives it that little bit of an edge that can close the game out for you.
Yeah, I like to think about this card running well in Phoenix decks, but I also see this card being very good in something like Grixis Control. It's the kind of card that if you protect it on the battlefield, if you have a way to, prevent it using counter spells and then you remove all of your opponent's creatures, while this sits on the battlefield, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And most of those control decks are going to run non-creature spells. So this is just... It's going to become a threat very fast. It's a really early game beater that can quickly turn into a big late game clock. I think that it's just anything that gets bigger and better as the game goes on. We always talk about like those kind of things, like cards that can transition from being, really good early on. I mean, I could see this being very good in aggro as well, because if you play it in something that has like dive down and like burn spells and then other stuff like Young Pyromancer and Monastery Swiftspear.
That's how I would build this deck. You want cantripping 1-cost spells that you can just shoot through a bunch of them all at once.
Sure.
In a more control-y build like you were talking with Grixis, there are times where you draw this on turn 9, turn 10, both players are out of cards, and a Flying Haste 1/1 might get you there, but I'd rather be able to like Wild Slash out ahead of it and opt in response and give it trample with crash through, and playing these cantripping 1-cost spells, protect it with things like spell pierce, those kind of effects where it's gonna mana leak, those kind of things, so that it can just keep punching through and you're constantly controlling and drawing cards and just keeping up, and then you eventually get to the red blue Drake that's going to take advantage of all those cards being in your graveyard and draw you a card. That the Phoenixes are going to come up out of the graveyard based on how many you've cast that turn. I feel like this just really slots well into
you can, and if you're watching, you can hear just from us talking about this card how many different applications that we think it could be good in. And in Limited, I think it will be less good, because in Limited you're going to have want to have a creature-centric kind of build with most limited situations. You're going to want to have like anywhere from like 10 to 14 creatures and then some non-creature spells depending. It's really about having bodies on the board. But in Pioneer, I think this card is excellent. It's going to play alongside some Drakes, some Phoenixes. It could play in Control. It could play in Aggro. It could play in Blue-Red Burn. It's a very, very, very good card.
Yeah, uncommon, no less. Let's talk about a Mythic. One of our new mutate creatures from Ikoria, Vadrok, Apex of Thunder. So let's break this down. Without the mutate ability, we have got a Jeskai 3/3 that's got flying and first strike. Solid, okay? Elemental Dinosaur Cat, not super relevant creature types, maybe elemental. That's not what we're going to go with.
It's not as good as Mantis Rider, but it's solid. Sure.
It's got a mutate ability of red, hybrid white-blue, one other. Whenever this creature mutates, you may cast target non-creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So you get a 3 CMC or less free Snapcaster style effect. You get a enchantment kind of left over that gives flying and first strike to some creature. So, Jake, I'm going to walk them real quick through the very base off the top of our head scenario that we came up with when we were talking about Vadrok. Turn 1, play an opt, play a Wild Slash on their mana dork, something like that. Turn 2, with Bone Crusher, cast Stomp, 1 red, 2 other. Cast Stomp on either them, that would be worst case scenario. Cast it on one of their mana dorks, that would be primo. Turn 3, cast the Bone Crusher Giant. You've got a 4/3 beater that if it gets targeted deals 2 damage to their face, I believe. And then Vadrok on turn 4 mutates for red, hybrid white, blue, 1 other. It re-triggers your Wild Slash or your Opt or whatever the 1-cost spell was in your graveyard. You get to cast that again for free. Plus it gives your 4/3 Giant flying and first strike. Whew! That is a lot. but I do think that it's got some of that kind of tempo-y Jeskai combat trick attacking and spell slinging thing to it that makes a really good card in these colors.
Sure, and it doesn't even exile the card that you put in the yard. So if you're playing like Drake effects, or if you're playing like a Jeskai kind of build that has like Drakes that get fueled by having instants and sorceries in the yard, this isn't even going to affect that. It's just allowing you to get extra value. And the way that I like to build decks is I like running effects like Cathartic Reunion and Tormenting Voice, or not Tormenting Voice anymore, I run Thrill of Possibility, but effects like this are going to allow you to pitch, cards that may be removal, allow you to continue fueling your hand, and then when you play Vadrock, you're casting that card without paying its mana cost. And I mean, it seems really strong.
It's got a lot of potential. I think that some more of its potential is going to come from, do we get any solid low CMC mutate creatures that can go into decks alongside it? Because you're really going to get maximum value off of this if you can mutate another creature onto it, give it more abilities, and re-trigger that whenever this creature mutates, you can cast a non-creature with 3 CMC or less from your graveyard for free.
Because we do know that whenever something mutates, it gets all mutate effects, correct?
It re-triggers all the mutate effects, and it goes on top or under, mostly based, and mostly you're only going to want to base that decision on the power toughness that you want on top. But then it would have everything. So if you mutated this again with just a vanilla 1/1, let's use a very base example, but it has mutate. Sure. Mutate a 1/1 onto this, where we already have Vadrock on underneath, we'll say, a Bone Crusher Giant. So you've got 4/3 power on top. You've got Flying First Strike. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability, it deals 2 damage to that creature's control, to that spell's controller. The new creature mutates onto the bottom because we don't want the 1/1 toughness on top. They don't add, it just takes the top power and toughness. All that does, though, is re-trigger the mutate ability, and you can recast that thing. Like Jake said, it didn't exile the card that you did it to the first time, so you could hit that spell again, Wild Slash again, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, it would say explicitly on the card if you were supposed to exile the card. Absolutely. And it doesn't say that. So if you have Lightning Strike in the in the yard and you continually mutate this, you're just going to get 3 damage over and over for free. The card isn't going to get exiled. The big drawback of this card, obviously, is the legendary. You're not going to be able to play multiples of them on the battlefield.
But I do think this is a huge target, and being a 3 CMC
huge
3/3, I would go ahead and run 4 in the deck, at least from the outset, to see what we do. And also, I do think it would be beautiful if there is another mutate creature that fits well with this creature into its colors, and the mutate cost is like 3 or less. Then you're really getting into the competitive CMC range with your entire deck, keeping it that way. You'd have 8 mutate creatures with 4 Vadrock and 4 of this, ethereal one, whichever one that we haven't seen yet. And then you run some stuff to mutate them onto and hopefully be able to trigger those abilities more than once. I think it's got a lot of promise. I know we've kind of rambled on this one. Mutate is a very new, very complicated ability that everybody's really trying to fully understand right now. And I think it's hard to assess the power level of these mutate creatures so far, just because we haven't seen them in action and we haven't seen the full set revealed yet. That really gives us a sense of, are we going to be able to mutate legendary mutate trigger creatures more than once in a game? There's a lot of questions still up in the air, but I think that Vadrock is very powerful and the potential exists.
Yeah, I think the card's great. The reason it's included is because free spells are free spells.
Yep, every time you get a free spell, it's worth talking about. Now I want to talk about my personal favorite card that I've seen in this set so far. I love this card too. It's so good. There is already a Rakdos 2/2 Minister at the beginning of your upkeep. All players draw a card and then take a damage. It has Menace built in. You've also got an Angrath Planeswalker that hasn't really been played, but it's a 4-cost Planeswalker, I believe, that gives all of your creatures Menace. And you can make armies. It's one of those army, from War of the Spark kind of cards.
Sure.
Labyrinth Raptor is a 2-cost Rakdos 2/2 Minister. Whenever a creature you control with Menace becomes blocked, defending player sacks a creature blocking it. Plus, you can flamethrower your creatures with Menace for 1 black, 1 red at infinite amount, only dependent on your mana available. This card is a house. I love this card.
I'm going to tell you my first impressions. It's really good early, and it's really good late.
Right. Either way.
This is one of those cards where if you are in top deck mode with your opponent, if each of you have answered each other's board, and now you play your Labyrinth Raptor, the fact that you're going to have that flamethrower ability attached to its big word there, menace, meaning they can't just get one creature on the board and expect to answer this. This is very, very good. Also the application alongside removal.
Right, exactly.
You play
That's
this on turn 2. Yeah, play it on turn 2. Next turn, say they do have 2 blockers for it. Obviously, they want to block it because it's going to end up closing out the game. If they don't, they go to block that creature with their 2 creatures. Now, all of a sudden, they have to sack one of them, and then you're able to kill the other one with removal. Now you've 2-for-1'd with it. Like, I just can't really think of a better card for like a black-red Pioneer aggro deck, and man, I'm really excited.
It's a
Nightmare Dinosaur.
Yeah, it's a card that I was very excited to see. I think it's got standard application as well. That's going to be one of the first decks I brew is a standard Menace deck, and see how that ends up falling out. But it absolutely has got Pioneer possibility as well. We already have black aggro decks that are very competitive in the space. Why not make it a Menace deck? Add the red color, opens up some more removal, opens you up to cards like Wild Slash, Lightning Strike, and drop your Labyrinth Raptors in there. I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, I don't think we really need to talk about it much more. It's a really good card. Let's talk about Luminous Brood Moth. This has a Mothra variant. Big thing about this card is it is not legendary.
Yeah.
Also, big thing about this card is it pairs with Solemnity, which is why we're featuring it on this list. The card by itself isn't exactly the kind of like game-breaking thing that is like, oh man, that's going to close out the game, a 3/4 flyer for 4. It's better to just wait until you get 5 mana and play something like Lyra Dawnbringer. But the reason that this exists and why we have it on this list is because of how Solemnity works with it. Joel, why don't you go ahead and break that down for everybody so that they understand this combo if it's not obvious to them.
Yeah, so Luminous Broodmoth, like Jake said, you may be surprised to see a 4 CMC card that we think might have Pioneer application, because it's one of those cards that if the effect is splashy as hell, but is probably just going to happen too late. If you're not on the play with this spell, your opponent's already had their 4 mana opportunity to wipe your board, which there are multiple ways to do that in Pioneer and even in Standard right now. So on the play, this card is fine, it's solid, but on the draw it gets a lot worse in my opinion. Now the Solemnity Combo, and the only reason that we're using this as a Pioneer possibility is because it says players can't get counters. Counters also can't be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. So, what you have here, jump to Fiend Artisan. Let's jump back to the Broodmoth. We've got the Broodmoth. Whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. Meaning that if it went to go die again, Luminous Broodmoth would check if it has flying, see that it has flying, and let it die for good. What Solemnity does is keep that flying counter from going onto it, and so you're able to cycle that creature over and over again, that death creature, and
if you have a
sack
sack outlet.
Right, that's the other part of this, is that this is not a 2-card combo. You also need a payoff for a creature dying over and over again. I would think that the floor, the bare minimum effect that you would want is whenever a creature dies ping, so you want some kind of Blood Artisan effect.
Like a Zulaport, Cutthroat, or a Blood Artist, something like that.
You need to have something like that on the field, and then you need to have an infinite sack outlet that's not mana restricted. So like say... Hidden Stockpile. Jake and I were talking about the possibility of this one. Hidden Stockpile, it costs mana to sack a creature. You want to run something like Woe Strider that just says sacrifice a creature, scry 1. So that the cycle would work like this if you haven't seen it yet.
Yep.
You sack your creature with Woe Strider, Blood Artisan deals a damage to your opponent. Luminous Broodmoth checks to see if that creature had flying. If it doesn't, it returns it to the battlefield with a flying counter on it. as it goes to put the flying counter on it, Solemnity's ability keeps that flying counter from going onto it, and the creature remains a non-flying creature that can then be sacked to Wolf Strider again. The Blood Artisan deals a damage, and if they don't have any interaction with this, it becomes kind of like the Walking Ballista Heliod combo in Pioneer, where it's inevitable that they're just going to win once they've got the mana and they've got the ability to do it over and over again. Is it good? No. Is it fun? Hell yeah. Is it janky? Yes. Combos, am I asking myself questions that all of the answers are positive to make myself look smarter? Yes. What you need is 4 different cards on the battlefield to make this combo work. So while it's notable, probably not realistic in Pioneer, it's not going to happen in Standard because, as you can see, Solemnity is from Amonkhet.
Right.
But it was definitely notable that a kind of combo like this was printed into this set, enough so much that we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen. Weird decks pop up all the time, and there might be somebody who figures out how to build Solemnity and Luminous Broodmoth into a Pioneer deck that probably has some sort of other win condition, maybe something like, I don't know, Approach of the Second Sun.
Yeah, some good cards.
Yeah, we'll see. But it's a fun card.
It's a fun one. Ikoria spoilers have got us super pumped. We are loving the set so far. It is big, stompy, crazy, and we can't wait to see where it goes from here. Look out for more videos covering Pioneer and the cards that we think are viable from Ikoria once we start getting more and more of the sets to come out. Check out our other videos for all the Ikoria spoilers. We are talking about this set coming out every single day. Every single time we got more spoilers, Jake and I are off to the races making videos just for you to watch. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with those things. Jake, I'm tapped out.
Otherwise, let us know what we missed. Put it in the comments. We always like to hear that. If there's a card that you think is going to be good in Pioneer, we want to hear about that card. Let us know why you think it's going to be good. We always like to respond to comments. We like to hear from you and what we missed. It helps us do better work in the future. And until next time, I'm tapped out.